My first impression about the Drakerion was very positive. Yet, game's playstyle variance was one of my concerns I had then, mainly due to lack of familiarity with the game at that point. Now that I've played at least a couple times each of 5 starter decks, I feel like I have a basic idea. In short, this game actually has 2 layers of playstyle variance. This is something I have never thought of in the other TCGs before. Let's get started. Playstyle is something I define as the difference in how one plays a game in TCG. The variation of playstyle is one of the biggest appeal to this genre. In Drakerion, I have concluded that there are actually 2 factors contributing to the playstyle variance. The first one is the standard deck archetype. This is where each decks are built with certain playstyle in mind. The second one is a playstyle determined by how the player carried their game. So it's the controller-driven playstyle. If I tie this to the other general aspect of the TCG, I thought this would fit to the difference in strategy and tactics. The playstyle based on the deck archetype is strategical playstyle, while player-controlled playstyle is tactical playstyle. This is nothing but classic deck archetype. Drakerion uses card pool isolation, similar to other TCG like Flesh and Blood. The pros and cons of card pool isolation is something I had discussed more detail in the other video of this series. But in a nutshell, the card pool isolation allows developers to intentionally create playstyle variance in the game by giving each card pool unique tools. My personal interpretation of existing 5 starter decks' strategical playstyle categorization are as following. And feel free to correct me if you think something differently. It's a good and exciting discussion for me. Lakmar starter is aggro-oriented archetype deck, and this has been confirmed by the designer of the game. This kingdom currently has a flavor of attacks with quantities rather than quality. We can readily see on some of the cards that suicide attack is encouraged tactics. A subtype mechanics, Prime Legion affiliation cards have discard triggered base mechanics. Dwarves in the Wasteland starter deck are beefy characters. Several characters in this deck have ranged attacks, while other starter decks barely has one. If I were to categorize this deck, I'd go with mid-range archetype here. Ranged attacks, if unchecked, will continue to chip opponent's character away without itself losing any health. Although they make look small, they are threats. This deck also has access to character heal, which is currently only in this starter deck. Talisman starter deck has as tall character as the Wasteland, but rest of the characters are more to support them. I believe primary strategy of this deck is to get the best value out of the named characters. This is by means of attachments, using remaining characters to support their longevity. This deck tends to run out of cards quicker than the other deck, which tells me it is perhaps designed to win early. So putting all together, threat, tempo, and essential, this deck is a gimmick archetype. In Carthage starter deck, Unexpected Exhumation on Necros and perhaps Resurrected Champion can output currently the highest single turn damage. For example, at turn 5, you play Necros and use Unexpected Exhumation on it. That's 5 attack, but it readies back. Now it can deal another 5. What if you had another Unexpected Exhumation already in your hand? Potentially 3 attacks in a single turn by Necros. That's massive 15 damages from 5 gold. Single character. If this was turn 6, add 3 more. Turn 7, another 3. And at turn 8, we're looking at 21 damages. After all that, you most likely still have some goals to spare. The lastly added starter deck, Gil Estelle, is a Mage Kingdom. This seems to be control archetype card pool. The starter deck has still powerful characters with some answers, including a card like Minor Time Warp, where you negate opponent's attack for an action, and as a result, you end up taking consecutive turns. So I believe this is a disruptive aggro, or also known as tempo archetype. Now let's look at perhaps newer concept, what I call tactical playstyle. This is a playstyle player controls. In the previous TCG games I had played, usually deck archetypes was so coherent to the point playing those decks in entirely different playstyle than the deck's archetype, it just did not work. Therefore, deck archetype was the synonym of the actual gameplay style, except in the very special circumstances. The classic special circumstance is the mirror match. In this situation, based on the lack of draw and perhaps who goes first or second, the proper way to play the deck would require picking the right role for the match. This is a classic concept of the Magic strategy guide, Who's the Beatdown. Here, we have to recognize in a given match if you should be a beatdown or control role. Choosing the wrong role and forcing regular archetype strategy may cost a game. I believe Drakerion takes this role assignment to entirely new dimension. This game gives autonomy to the players how they want to play. What I mean by this is that any deck can be played pretty much in any play style one prefers, whether it's aggro, control, mid-range, combo, and so on. Obviously, it doesn't mean they are tactically appropriate, but you can play them and feel the playstyle. Let's take a look at some of the tactical playstyle examples that I can see fitting nicely into different traditional archetype playstyle. For aggro, it's straightforward. We keep hitting opponent characters on the board. Only deploy new character when you don't have any more means to attack. If done right, opponents will be forced to start playing in aggro mode as they may not just let 1 or 2 health remaining character to be just standing. Similarly, they may be forced to deploy a character that were supposed to be deployed later in the game in order to just maintain the character on board so they won't lose the game. If you can give this much pressure to the opponent, you are definitely playing aggro. It is most likely there will be only few characters both sides of the board when you are playing aggro playstyle. One way to play control playstyle in Drakerion is to not attack unless you are absolutely needed to. You let opponent attack your characters. Ideally, your opponent may end up over-attacking and losing express value of the character. For example, if they end up using 5 attack character to finish 1 remaining health character, they have just wasted 4 attack power. During control phase of play, you just deploy characters in order to maintain the board occupancy so you won't lose the game. Eventually, if all goes as planned, opponents run out of goals and attack source. At this point, you could start attacking back, and perhaps even get consecutive actions as opponents has no more tricks left. For combo, even if you didn't have what people recognize as a combo card, you can save goals and cards in hand. In this game, there's no limit how much you can save them. So if you save up cards and goals until mid or late game, you can suddenly play multiple otherwise impossible characters and cards in a single turn. As a result, a net output of a turn is no short of calling combo turn. This is a combo that you created by your own tactics and not by just card interaction. Others like mid-range and tempo are by definition balanced flexible deck with switching attack and defense roles on the fly. So these decks, I believe, try to generally maximize individual net card value. These tactical playstyle variants are not just based on how you use your actions, but they start from how you set up your characters at the beginning of the game. The formation of the characters could certainly define or aid this. As players get more accustomed to Drakerion's meta, I am fairly certain one can look at the other player's starting formation and say, oh, this guy is playing aggro style. Isn't this really exciting? Is it really possible? Absolutely. If we go back to the analogy to chess, that's what exactly chess does. Your playstyle is not based on what pieces you are given. It is dictated by your actual play. Once again, I think this may be possible because alternating action system allowing more minute control of turn in any deck. Now, there is actually a downside of this. The issue is the autonomy itself. Providing so much autonomy to player, even with intentional playstyle design in the starter decks, each player may end up not following through the intended style, assuming such exists. Including myself, as a starter, the most common way to play Drakerion is look at individual card and try to maximize their express value, which is simply defined how much net damage the card produces and also absorb before it gets destroyed. I am not saying this is an incorrect way of playing, and perhaps may well be the best way to play Drakerion, but the issue is if each player does this, the game starts to feel simple trading of characters back and forth. As a net result, it may feel all the gameplay very similar. Autonomy comes with responsibility. If you prefer not having small trade back and forth gameplay, you should try intentionally pick a playstyle and play accordingly. Maybe you want to play aggro, maybe you want to play control. Currently, there are only 5 starter decks available to play, and I've only played a dozen games so far. So honestly, I have not been able to put all my thoughts in the practice yet. I'm still in the process of learning basics, how each card works. But for the 1 or 2 games, I tried to play with intentional playstyle in mind, and stuck with it. I think that's when I really start falling in love with this game. What I said may sound all theoretical, but I can say for certainty, Drakerion will let you play in many playstyles using the same deck. Of course, some may be great and some may be very weak, but as a player, you will feel the playstyle difference. In the end, the key here would be the game's balance. Ideally, if developer could balance cards such that if we play a deck by matching its strategy and tactical playstyle, then we get the best result. Yet in certain match, we need to switch to be really competitive. If that's a game balance they could achieve, I think this game may be an ultimate skill-based TCG. Thanks for watching.